mediation can help like build the culture of cooperation in the police department. Would that be a fair way of
Well, that may be true, but that wasn't what I was saying.
Okay, I'm sorry.
What I was saying is that through the inevitable process of peer communication that goes on among officers, if this mediation process is experienced in a positive way, that word will go out, I think.
Okay.
And I think it fits with the philosophy of community policing.
Hi, I'm Abigail Reichel. I represent the Women's Parish Senator's Office as a social worker there. Can I ask for some clarification on question one? Like, if you go back up to where you had like a little bit of a preface before
Yes.
the actual question, 'cause I guess the way the question's asked makes me feel like maybe I'm thinking about it wrong, but I guess the way I was thinking about it was that what the chief noted was like getting all the folks, within his department to be able to buy into something, and that supervision was the issue. But I guess the way I'm reading the question doesn't seem like it's asking that. Is it asking that?
No, specifically what we're talking about is buy-in to community policing, right? And that supervision is an issue in getting buy-in for community policing. And we suspect that mediation might help sell community policing. But we're asking folks if they agree with that, and if so, how.
If we agree that mediation is a way for him to get officers to be able to buy into community policing.
Yes.
Okay. I think that it would work, but I feel like it would take a lot of work to get there, and it's not something that can just be like a procedure protocol that's written down on paper. But in my experience in working for any sort of organization, that organization or group of people are guided, like the culture is usually set from the top and sort of trickles its way down. But I think that mediation could particularly be good if we're thinking about like the officers' examples in like New York, where they say like if mediation works, then it would be taking off the officer's record or whatever. I think that might be something that could get them to buy into community policing, because when I think about the officers getting that opportunity, then I think about like what maybe they could then understand for like my clients that I represent, what such an opportunity would mean for them for their criminal record, and then there could be some parallels and like a way to see one another in a different way. It's like getting jumbled in my brain, but anyway, I think that mediation, because officers in that aspect could see how it could be beneficial for themselves, could maybe then be able to extend that in their heads and think about how it could be beneficial for larger communities. Maybe that's being too optimistic, but yeah.
I'm not sure I understand.
So like, if we're like, if he wants to get officers to be able to buy into community policing and using mediation as something that like, get them to buy into it, like this is a good thing. Like, if we took the example from like New York, where like if they participated in mediation, then this could get it taken off their record. Because I don't know if the officers or anyone in the mid, like going into it, be like, one of the questions you might want to ask yourself is, how is this going to be beneficial for me, right? That might be a question that most people go into any sort of situation with. And if officers see the way in which it's beneficial to them, they might later be able to see how it would be beneficial for a larger community. Like, oh, I might get this now about how this could be good because it's benefiting me, and that like, if I participate in this, then it's gonna get taken off my record, or for the police force. And then maybe being able to, like, if we can draw a parallel between that and like what the folks I work with go through with their own like criminal record. Like, look, we're all sort of in the same boat here, right? Like, you have this process you go through, or like if you commit something, then there's like a process of accountability. The same way with the very people that you're policing. And so I feel like a tactic like that could be a good way to draw a parallel between those two seemingly opposing groups of people. Does that make any sense?
I think I get you.
Yeah, and I think it would take a lot of fleshing out, but that's how it was going around in my head.
Okay.
I'm Cassie Pearson. I represent Common Ground Relief Legal Clinic. I want to address part of question two because it's twofold. I liked all the case studies. I particularly was drawn to the Denver and New York model because of what they include as part of complaints. Specifically, they both will include racially based complaints, and the others exclude those criteria. I think it's important to include them. And New York also made mention of the fact that not only racist remarks, but homophobic slurs, sexist slurs, and ethnic slurs are also inclusion criteria, and I would like to see those included so that we don't forget a whole segment of the community.
So you're saying you like the inclusion criteria from New York and Denver specifically because they will mediate claims of bias?
Correct.
And you would like for us to explicitly list out those types of bias
Yeah.
in the inclusion criteria?
Yeah, because I think if they're left out, then they're just totally overlooked. It's like, oh, he made a sexist remark, oh, well, too bad.
Yeah, I understand. Ted?
I'm Ted Quant, Director of the Toomey Center for Peaceful Justice here at Loyola. And in question number one, as I understood question number one, it was, quote, supervision is the biggest implementation challenge in building community policing. The chief wants to see supervisors teaching sell the stop. And how can the mediation program assist the chief in helping to bring community policing policies all the way down from the command level? So I saw that as two questions. Question number one, is mediation supportive of the community policing agenda? And that agenda, when you look at it, has things like sell the stop. What is sell the stop? That's nothing but being able to communicate to someone the fairness and appropriateness of the stop, which doesn't often happen. And in fact, in the research that we looked at, it gave these specific examples. Every one of the examples are mediation examples. Listening to the other person, assessing the situation. Sarah, which was another thing that they mentioned in here, Sarah is nothing but mediation. And so rather than, while mediation is a specific thing when we bring two people together to discuss it, the concepts and basic principles and values behind it are already a part of what the police department is supposed to be teaching people to do and practice. So from Sarah to what they're calling procedural justice, those kind of things. And what the studies have shown is that when people think it's fair, even if it's against them, they go along with it. So these are the things that happen. Now, when you're getting a ticket, you already made. You could be wrong, but you made. So you're already in a conflictual situation, which can be escalated or de-escalated depending on how one has learned some of these skills. So that's on that point. So I think that the mediation program is not a separate program, although it does have a separate aspect because of the concreteness of a real mediation. Its principles and values ought to be taught throughout the work and are already supposedly a part of the practice and best practices of the police department. So it totally goes with it. The second part was a leadership question about, and I'm looking at it from within the department, not necessarily to the community part. Well, within the department, if you already have a set of values and a culture that is not supportive of this, but is valued and effective by what people know how to do, then they don't have a reason to change. If I'm good at what I do, and now you want me to change what I do to some soft kind of sociological, those people's idea, that ain't gonna work for me because I deal with bad guys and I know how to do it. I've been doing it for years, so don't be messing me with this stuff. So if that's the value system, that's not going to change too easily. Now, for the leadership that says we're going to go to community policing and explain why, to the police that's getting there, the question is, how is that going to work for me? Can I do that? Does that make sense in my experience? And can I be effective? And I think some of the answers to that is no. I don't know how to do that way. And if I start doing it, I'm going to be less effective. And when I start being less effective, the numbers are going to demonstrate that I'm less effective. And then the higher command is going to question why my numbers are not right. So a part of the leadership process has to be some real discussion at the top level of what's gonna happen when your early responders actually try to do this and their numbers are not right. The things that you count to value and evaluate, their numbers are lower because they're less effective. And they're less effective because they're practicing a skill they haven't mastered. So in the process of mastering, as Kurt Lewin points out, you go through an ineffective stage before you get to an effective stage. But when you're in the ineffective stage, you're being evaluated on the standards of the previous culture. So if the standards have not been changed in terms of what the previous culture is measuring, then you will not be successful. Then you will revert back to the primitive behavior and sabotage the cultural change. So these are some questions that really have to be discussed within how leadership will approach the question.
That was a lot. I'm gonna try to briefly recap. So we've got that, Ted argues that mediation does go hand in hand with community policing philosophy. For various reasons, including, procedural justice, etc. But that we have a cultural challenge because the current values in the department are based on effectiveness, and effectiveness is measured in a specific way. And so at some point, we need to talk to departmental leadership about changing evaluation methods to be prepared.
To look at what should be measured under community policing. What are the measurements under community policing when someone is really doing it right?
Right.
And the idea of first responders or in the theory of change that John Carter wrote in the book Leading Change, there are some people who are going to say, I get this and I'm going to do it and I'm going to try it. But as they try it, they're in opposition to the system itself. Plus, the measurement of their success is based on a previous model. So that's what we're trying to look at. So there has to be they have to be seen early by the command, and they're not seen as team players by peers because they are now practicing behaviors that are contrary to the way they ought to be as team players. But they are exemplifying what we're trying to achieve. They're going to be punished by peers and then by command if they are not, but what has to happen is command has to see them and say, Mary Lou has been really doing what we're trying to do. Her numbers are not showing what the numbers are, but her practice is what we're trying to achieve. And with support and with her being held up as a model of what we're trying to do, we can show that the leadership is behind this culture change. And that then will make other people who weren't ready to make that move say, well, I want to get some pat on the back by command too. And then it also puts a different space in terms of the peer kind of situation.
Yeah.
Mary Lou, Special Assistant of the Presentation, working for Exodus House, where we're housing chronically homeless individuals. I guess I would answer number 3 and say that probably it would be wise for us to at least look at people who are coming and asking us for membership if we really believe that the values and the principles of mediation are about listening and inclusion and things like that. So to have a space somehow, since we're very early on in the process, I think it would be beneficial. I think we have to also look and say, are the people who are asking us, what's their motivation? Is it just that they missed the memo, or is there some of that? But I think if this is really going to work, we have to be able to be transparent and build the trust of the community. And this is our first. It's an easy way. I agree with you, Matt, that you can't have everybody's voice, but wouldn't it be great if we tried?
Well, that was a really Oh, Patrick, we're coming back to you.
I will actually just bounce up what Ted Kwok just mentioned. I actually had Cotter down here to talk about as well. If you go back to number 1, Cotter in his book Leading Change, the biggest thing that he talks about is just creating this sense of urgency. And whenever you talk about leading change processes, you really need this sense of urgency because people are not going to change unless they see that there's a reason to change or a reason for that change. And one of the next big things that a person looks for is the person above me, is my manager involved in this change? Is my manager just speaking about the change, or are they actually walking what they're talking? So I think throughout the entire chain of command, they have to show, the managers and the people throughout the department are going to need to show why this is important and why we really need to bring this mediation program in. So.
And so you're saying we really need buy-in from
Throughout.
lieutenants?
Yes.
Can I ask you just one more thing? In Kirk Lewin, when he talks about force field analysis, there's the driving force, which is the urgency. We got to do it. The community's against us. Look at these statistics. Look at how to, we really need to do this. The restraining force is the resistant force, is the need of that officer for what's missing for him, what's in it for me. And while we can drive with, you better do this or this is going to happen, if we go to the other side and say, what is the fear? What is missing? What is it that why are you against this? Well, and peer to peer, cop to cop, man, come, you know how it is out there, we got to do this. Okay, so I'm hearing that, but what if we tried this? Would you be, in other words, you got to go to removing resistance. When you remove resistance, the field moves in the direction you want it to go. Sometimes as much as if you had a stronger force pushing. So removing the resistance is looking at the need of the officers who we're trying to get to do this, to get their buy-in. And they see it in their interest, they see it's important, and they see when they're trying and it's not working, that they haven't failed. They haven't mastered it yet, and that they can get support with that. That's what I'm talking about.
May I ask a clarifying question? Because Arlinda Westbrook, Chief of Public Integrity Bureau, so I handle the disciplinary process. And clarifying question, because it sounds like when you're speaking of mediation, when you talk about numbers and effectiveness, it sounds like you're talking about mediation beyond the disciplinary process. Am I correct?
I'm talking about, you tell a police officer, you need to treat people with respect and dignity. You need to take time to listen to their problem. You need to be more empathetic, feel both sides of the story, assess the problem in a certain kind of way before you take action. Now, your time on task has gone up, and you're measuring at the department how many stops and cases people are dealing with.
Correct.
So all of a sudden, the guy who goes out, just kicks ass and calls names, his numbers look good. He did 30 cases. The man that's doing community policing did 20 cases. The man who's doing community policing is going to be criticized because he doesn't have the numbers that the other guy got. So you're rewarding those who don't do what you want to do and punishing those who do what you want to do.
So you really are talking a little bit broader, meaning what we were first focused on was the mediation process in a disciplinary arm, i.e., Captain Glasser gets a complaint of professionalism, PIB investigates that, Captain Glasser and the citizen sit down and talk about that process and how it's going to resolve itself or adjudicate itself is what the focus was. And I think what you're talking about now that the questions are being asked is even before the complaint, the officer that is more in the complaint avoidance stage and how the rank and file or the higher ups will handle that.
Right.
Okay.
And I think they go hand in hand because you can't.
No, I understand. I was just trying to make the
Yeah.
connection. I got you.
I think that's it works together.
Gotcha.
We'll take one more comment, then we'll move forward.
Yeah, I'm just going to respond to what you're saying earlier, and I understand where you're going with that, but in terms of getting boggled down in the sense of stats and numbers, that's going to take away from that process that we're trying to get to. And how do you sell that? I guess you can do an interchange with the language, so they understand and conceptualize mediation and philosophy behind mediation. understanding the same, some alternatives to litigation. And there isn't any limitation or criteria for mediation. Mediation is used in Israel, in Palestine, conflicts to order, they reach a resolution. And I think what will be important in terms of including the higher ups, so to speak, to actually train in the mediation process, have them conduct some mediation, so there's a sense of understanding of the process. So it's not just something I heard about or read about. And I can appreciate the model and have that insight. Two, one, and I think you mentioned something about like the police chief, just hypothetically speaking, explaining the process to a citizen. One primary goal of rebuilding that relationship would be to start off with trust, and you would need a neutral party that's able to do that. Start off with that trust. So I would just, kind of put out there almost like a requirement for the higher ups on whatever sides, both sides, to be fully trained to really understand that process. And then it could trickle down. So when their staff member is saying, I don't get it, I don't know why, would be enforced, then there's more appreciation.
So I think this was a really productive discussion. Just to bring it back around, what we're talking about here is how our mediation program can be supportive of the department's overall goal. Like, I think everyone in this room likes the idea of community policing, and certainly the chief has adopted that as a philosophy. So we're talking about how this program can help contribute to that goal, along with the other questions. I wanted to recap real quick that several issues were raised that we're gonna try to address in this meeting or others, that we need to investigate the state statute regarding mediation, that we need to discuss participatory methods of bringing our ideas to a larger group and having them adopt them or speak on them, and that we need to talk with the department about their culture implementation plans and what we can actually do to support that. So at this point in the agenda, I'm gonna move things around a little bit, and we're gonna hear from Deputy Chief Arlinda Westbrook. She's gonna explain the complaint process to us, because honestly, it's hard to talk about how we want mediation to go without understanding how we get to that point, right? So she's gonna lay all that out. I encourage all of us to ask lots of questions, because Chief Westbrook is busy and we may not be able to get her back in this room.
Excuse me. I just want to keep in mind that we are like 15 to 20 minutes behind schedule, so.
Right, so I'm gonna
So with the question.
cut mine down and give more time for questions and answers, because I think that'll be more productive than trying to go through the entire slide. But I'll let Ursula kind of start us off. But this is just an overview that we normally use for our Citizens Academy that we have, and that's another way that we bring citizens into understanding our process. We have a Citizen Review Academy that basically goes through weeks and weeks of learning about the police department, and one of the particular classes deals with just the complaint process and PIB, which is Public Integrity Bureau. So one of the things I want to focus on is cut to the chase and talk a little bit about our intake process. So if Ursula will go to the first slide, and we'll skip over to really page 4. That's pretty much just the command structure. I'm the assistant superintendent. I'm right under Chief Surpass, along with 3 other deputy superintendents. And I have a commander, and I have lieutenants, and a number of officers that work in the Public Integrity Bureau. I am a citizen or civilian like many of you in here. I am an attorney by trade. And so that's strange to many people, because most Public Integrity Bureau deputy chiefs have been police officers. First time in New Orleans history, the mayor and the chief decided they wanted a civilian over the Public Integrity Bureau, and I'm one of 3 in the country. Nashville and Seattle, Washington are other 2 cities that have adopted that model of having a little independence on the inside, along with other review panels and other complaint oversight, if you will, or misconduct oversight. I'm gonna go right into the 4th page, which is our structure, which is inclusive of the different types of complaints that we have. I have an administrative unit, And what that would encompass is the officers that handle administrative type of complaints. I have a criminal unit, and that encompasses a special investigative unit that is more of a proactive unit that is housed in a separate location from my office, separate and housed separate from the department. I know, and maybe few other deputy chiefs who have served in my position know where they're housed, but no other officers in the police department know where they're housed other than officers that may have been a part of that unit. A part of that particular unit is to do a lot of my, what I call proactive investigations or undercover investigations of police officers. The criminal section kind of speaks for itself. Most people have an understanding of criminal type behavior. So when officers are accused of any type of criminal wrongdoing, in my internal affairs office, unlike a lot of others in the country, believe it or not, we handle administrative and criminal investigations. Of course, when I finish my investigation, it would have to be forwarded to a criminal body such as District Attorney's Office or the U.S. Attorney's Office or any of the other criminal partners that I have. But we would do the full investigation along or in partnership with that criminal body. The administrative investigations are most of what we deal with. And that's what most of you will be more familiar with in terms of professionalism type of complaints, which is a large number of complaints. It's as minor as an officer missing court to something as far as professionalism or any breach or violation of departmental policies. So as many will say, even many officers, a lot of times we have a number of what I would consider training issues. And that we have a number of policies and procedures that officers have to follow. And when newly, imagine, and I don't know if many of you know, just as being a lawyer, imagine having to know the entire, all of the law without having to go research. You just have to know it on the top of your head. And so to understand what many of the officers have a challenge in is that they have this large policy manual of policies that have been created over the years. And as you become an officer, especially a young officer, you're to know all of these policies and procedures. And the moment one of those policy and procedures are broken, and someone walks into my office, so I'm gonna walk you through it. Someone comes into my office and says, I wanna make a complaint on an officer. I'm gonna use Captain Glass just because he's here today. They come in the office and they have what I call my intake unit. The intake unit is the unit that actually takes in the complaint. So Captain Glasser would come in, and the individual might have had an interaction with him, let's say, in terms of a traffic stop. And the individual comes in and says that, I think that I was racially profiled. Or I think that, sometimes they may just say, I don't know why I was stopped. I'm not sure why I was stopped. And that may at least, have an element of racial profiling. So from that person would walk into my office, speak with an officer that's in my intake unit, and actually explain their interaction with Captain Glasser. Sometimes they'll know Captain Glasser's name, sometimes it'll just be an unknown officer, and I have to determine which officer it was. Once they go through that process of giving him the complaint, then we initiate an investigation. And that is done in my office, and I'm gonna talk more about administrative cases because that's the vast majority of cases. I think in 2010 we had over 1,600 complaints. In 2011 we had about 1,400 complaints. And currently in 2012, we're continuing to trend down in terms of the number of complaints that are being made. I equate most of that to the training that has been happening within the last couple of years. A lot of the captains and rank and file that are now being more proactive in their monitorings and their roll calls and in their education of officers. We have an early warning system now, and we have JPIP. All of those things are things that we've been implementing in order to try to be in more of a complaint avoidance mode, and also to train and talk to officers about how to avoid having complaints and how to have better interactions and better community type of interactions with individuals that will avoid complaints being filed. So once a complaint is filed, then we go through a process of investigating that complaint. The Police Officer Bill of Rights that we're all under has a time limit for all complaints to be investigated. Complaints are mandated to be being investigated in my office of an administrative nature within 60 days. If I appeal to the civil service for an extension, I can get an additional 60 days to have a max of 120 days to investigate an administrative complaint in the office. Criminal complaints don't have the same prescriptive timelines, of course, because of the nature of those type of complaints. And so, therefore, for most of those type of complaints, we'll have about 60 days to investigate them, sometimes 120, and we go through that process of investigation. To try to bring in this process, what would happen is that once I have a finding in my office, we have several different findings. An officer may be found not sustained. That means that I couldn't prove or disprove the allegation. An officer may be found sustained, which means that I actually could prove the allegations that were lodged against the officer and we sustained that violation. Sometimes we have NVOs, which is no violation observed. Sometimes part of the community policing is people come into our office or citizens come into our office all the time, and a lot of times it's not even for a complaint. They may just have to be referenced someplace in the department, but I have to track that. We track every citizen that walks in the Public Integrity Bureau, and we document that interaction in the Public Integrity Bureau. So a number of times, even when a citizen gets a traffic ticket, unfortunately they want to come in and they want to lodge it as a complaint. Just the fact that they got a traffic ticket. They have to adjudicate that in court. But I still document the fact that they came into the office and that at some point they consider that to be a complaint, and it may be downgraded, and downgraded is a touchy word, but in PIB it's when someone initially comes in and on its face it may look like it's a formal investigation, and then when you look at the facts and determine that in fact there was no violation of any policy on its face, or the allegations themselves did not encompass a violation, then we have different ways to code those so that we can at least document the interaction with the citizen that came into the office. In our criminal units, just to give you a little example, is that when you look at cases such as Danziger and Glover and things of that nature, those cases would have had some form of criminal investigation within the Public Integrity Bureau in terms of the launching of those or the beginnings of those. Some of those cases didn't move through this process like a number of the cases I have now, but when we have a case like that or an allegation similar, what is the charge of the Public Integrity Bureau's office is to investigate, and at a certain point bring in our federal partners or our district attorneys, and at that point we will have more of a conjoint or a mutual investigation that we launch together, and then at the appropriate time the case would be completely transferred to them. And if in fact there is no finding or violation of a criminal nature, then it has to come back to the Public Integrity Bureau for an administrative case, because even if an officer is not found to have criminal liability, it may be that there are procedures within the department that haven't been properly looked at or properly followed. So we still would do an administrative portion of the investigation. I think you can move past some more of these slides and we can get into some other explanations of what type of cases. When I'm dealing with now also, which has been as of February of 2011, we formulated what is called the Force Investigation Team. And that team now is housed in the Public Integrity Bureau, and from here on out we will be handling all of the shooting investigations. Formerly in the department, the homicide division would handle any shootings involving a hit or a death. And the Public Integrity Bureau would handle any police shootings when a police officer shot at an individual and missed. Justice came down and we talked about that as a procedure. The independent police monitors talked about that, and really, to be honest with you, meaning the unions, Captain Glasser being a big part of that, really advocated for a FIT team being a part of the Public Integrity Bureau and having a unit of officers that all they do is actually investigate police shootings and use of force, so that we can have what would be considered a specialized unit, and they would handle many of the use of forces and the shooting investigations and become experts in that area. So we basically collaborated together and everybody talked about it, and we formulated this FIT team, and I had the LA come down, who has a similar unit, and to do some training, and we're in the process of doing more training, but they came down, and since they're under consent decree, and have formulated a fit team under a consent decree. They came down and did a week's worth of training for my fit squad, and the commander of that unit there is in contact with us weekly to assist with continuing to get this team up and running and to continue to, for continuous training type purposes with this particular unit. And most of what they handle are the type of use of forces that would result in hospitalization. So even though my office would handle all use of force, this particular specialized team would only handle use of force that involve hospitalization or any serious use of force, and of course a police shooting would always be in that category. Any questions so far? The other area that I spoke of a little bit is that my special operations unit that is housed separate from my office. And the reason that they're so important is because the Public Integrity Bureau, which many may not know, takes all complaints. Anonymous, email complaints. Sometimes I walk into the office, we have them over voicemail. Most of our partners, such as the IBM's office, Federal Bureau of Investigation, many of our sister agencies, if a citizen feels more comfortable going into those departments, they will take complaints for the Public Integrity Bureau and transfer them to me for investigation. I'm the only unit that's housed with and charged with the ability to do the administrative investigation of police officers. So any of the units that may receive those complaints, so I think this is the other thing that's very confusing to citizens. They may go into the IPM's office and give them the complaint thinking they're investigating. All they can do is transfer it to the Public Integrity Bureau, but what I also allow as an effort to bring some more transparency, to bring trust, is that a number of times when citizens want to bring an IPM there with them or bring in some citizen group or citizen leader that they feel more comfortable with, I allow them to come in and assist the community person with lodging their complaint and making them feel a lot more comfortable in the office. One of the other things is that the process generally takes and involves, from a criminal nature, we'll have the complaint come in, have to go through an entire investigation, and then because we have to now go to an administrative investigation, those cases generally take much longer. They're not under the 160-day guideline, so many citizens have to understand also the difference in a criminal investigation and an administrative investigation and how long they may take in terms of adjudication. The specialized squad that I was talking about, a number of times I receive, believe it or not, we even have an in-touch system in the department where the chief allows members of the department to anonymously send him information about the department, whether it's misconduct, whether it's just simple as, why do we have to do this, chief? Can you answer how we can make things a little bit better? We had an in-touch just recently just about when can we get new police cars? So they use it for all types of communication with the chief. And where it's been extremely helpful to me is that, of course, whenever you have internal communication of misconduct, it's always better. And I get a lot of internal communication of misconduct through this in-touch system. And generally, 100% of the time, it's dead on. Because when someone from inside the department, so it's not true, as people still, I think, believe that there's still this code where officers don't report misconduct. Absolutely, that has changed, and that is, I have a completely different culture within the department that I think some of my predecessors have had, is that I have a number of my complaints that are internally generated. And a number of those complaints come through anonymous sources, and sometimes the officer actually makes himself, make me aware of who the officer is. I'll protect that officer similar to what I would with any confidential informant. And at any point where it's necessary, I've had officers who've had to also be known or testify, and they've done that also. I'm not saying it's across the board. I'm not saying that I don't still have issues of trying to help officers and figure out a process, and that'll be the next project that I'll give a unit like this, is how to protect and how to help within the culture of the police department to give me ideas about what to do with whistleblowers, how to assist when I have a whistleblowing type of scenario, and how to make sure that officers have an environment where they feel safe to come into the Public Integrity Bureau and report misconduct and not feel any retaliation from that, or even feel that there's a possibility of retaliation. That's something I'm gonna talk to the unions about and talk to groups like you about, and how to assist us with that. It's always best, of course, from the unions, such as Captain Glasser and many, we have fraternal order police. We all work very closely together, and as we continue working to improve the department, it's always better, and I can't keep reiterating, when we have communication from an internal perspective and get information from the officers as to how to make things better, and also information from the officers in reference to misconduct. I want to kind of cut it short because I can see you looking at the clock, so I don't want it